This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/MapperForward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome back to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, friends. I'm joined by Carlos Arcila, and we are talking about the Colombian coffee supply chain. But today we are going to talk a little more generally. In the last episode, we were talking about innovation in Colombia, and that led us into a kind of a mini conversation about the difference between commercial coffee and specialty coffee and the difference in pricing. And so today, as we look at what challenges do we see for the coffee industry over the next decade, I want to explore with you, Carlos, the difference between how specialty businesses are going to be affected with regards to the specialty coffees that they buy compared to roasters or cafes that are buying commercial grade coffee. What are your thoughts on that?
Look, I think it's a very interesting time. Obviously, it's not it's a common conversation these days with a lot of our roasters and clients around the world, that they're very concerned about the high prices. But I always try to bring them the opportunities in these difficult times. And I always said to them, look, you've always been a great supporter of great coffees, of specialty coffees. And I don't think you should back off, because a lot of people, what they're doing is, we've had these conversations and they say, look, we love working with you guys, but at the moment, Colombian coffee is so expensive that what I will do is, because of the relationship we have with you guys, we're just going to drop from being 70% in our blends to being 30% in our blends. And it's only because it's you guys that we love working with. Otherwise, it doesn't really make a point for us to continue with these coffees. And it's really hard to have those conversations and sad to see it. But in another way, we're thankful because of that relationship, we're able to still work with them. But my reply back to them is that I think we should almost see this problem in a different way. And what I mean by this is that in the past, commercial coffee and high specialty coffee was completely separated. There was a big gap of pricing in between both. But if you look at it on the other perspective, today, the differences in between an entry-level coffee or just making it to specialty or below specialty is very small in comparison to an 85 and 86. And that is what I call high-end specialty. So there is a lot of opportunities actually from people that want to jump and serve better coffees. And they're actually going to be a lot more competitive than before, because the pricing in between both, the differences are very small. So I think if you want to be here in the long term and you really want to push great coffees, there's never been a better time to do it than now, because the differences are so small that the differences in between buying in terms of money of what consumers will pay for an entry-level coffee to an 85, 86, it should be very small, because the difference is just completely small in the green. It's very insignificant. It's 10 to 15%, while it used to be 40 to 50%.
Right.
So that brings amazing opportunities to a lot of roasters in the world. But you have to see it in a different way, and you need to be able to invest in a difficult time. But I guess those type of investors or people that look at those opportunities are the ones that are going to be moving forward and be doing really well.
And folks, for those who are a little bit lost with regards to understanding why this the distance between those two pricings is closer than it's ever been, it's because the price of commercial coffee is so high compared to its historical prices over the past 4 or 5 years. The price of commercial coffee has gone up, and it's increased significantly, whereas the price of specialty coffee hasn't incrementally increased as much as commercial coffee has increased. And so that's why if you wanted to go into specialty and you used to use commercial coffee, your commercial coffee will be much more expensive, or the price increase from what you used to pay for commercial coffee compared to now is going to be a much higher percentage than those who were using specialty coffee and are continuing to use specialty coffee. Their prices have gone up, but not as much as what those who are using commercial grade coffee have gone up. Right, Carlos?
That is completely correct. And that is the opportunities that we are facing at the moment in these difficult and challenging times.
So as we look at what the coffee industry is going to be facing over the next 10 years, the challenges, I guess, and they're, obviously we're not fortune tellers and we don't know exactly what's coming, etc., etc. And by the way, for anyone, just for legal reasons, we want to say none of what we talk about in this series is financial advice or business advice or any of that stuff. We're just shooting the shit like Carlos and I always do when we have our great conversations. And, you know, I would always encourage people to go out and find people that you can have conversations like this with and you can explore ideas with. Carlos and I do that on the phone. You know, we talk about different things that we think is happening in the industry and we explore different ideas and we walk away from that feeling like, okay, so, you know, we thought about things differently. I don't agree with everything that Carlos thinks. Carlos doesn't agree with everything that I think, but we listen to each other and we're very curious about each other's thoughts.
We agree to disagree.
We agree to disagree, but it's such a wonderful way of jousting in our thoughts and ideas, because then it gives me a perspective from someone who I respect a lot and whose ideas I have a lot of respect for, and who has proven to me in the way that he carries himself with a lot of people that I deal with, that he leads with integrity. And to me, in an industry that's not always a value that you can find everywhere, this is somebody who I do want to joust my curiosity with. And so, Carlos, what do you see is the future challenges as we come into some challenging times? We're in challenging times as an industry. What do you see that they are for our industry?
Look, there's going to be a lot of challenges. I think the next 2 years are going to be very difficult. Not only for Colombia, but a lot of producing countries. I think the climate change definitely is being a massive part of it. At the moment, the amount of rains that are going through, we can even see it here in Australia, the amount of floods that we had, which has been crazy. Colombia is pretty much the same. Very difficult times, a lot of rain, not enough sun for the flowering of the coffee trees. So that's going to be very difficult, whether it is that we have severe droughts or a lot of rain. Any of both can affect dramatically both the quality and the yields of the coffee that we produce. The next one, and I think the one that we're all afraid of because we've seen what happened these last 12 months or 15 months, is the price volatility. Mm-hmm. I think this has opened a lot of interesting conversations to be had in the industry. I remember in the past, we're not considered a trader. We don't want to be that. We're producers that are sourcing great coffees from other farmers, and we're every season sourcing these coffees, buying them, paying them really well, and trying to work on a consistent basis with them. And we try to find buyers for that season for that coffee, and then we do it again 6 months after, depending on which region we're working. But by flying around the world and connecting with many people, I saw last year, at the beginning of last year, all these many people that we were speaking to that had all these massive long contracts in place. As the prices were moving up, they were literally laughing at me and saying, man, I'm already committed, signed a forward contract for 1.5 years. We're fantastic. We're going to kill it. And I was like, okay, great. Well, you don't really know what's coming up you, and you'll see it in the next few months. And that really burst into a lot of problems in the last 12 months. There's been a lot of defaults. Prices went up dramatically, and people expected producers just to come up and say, look, I don't want to be paid that much extra. I'm going to be paid what I committed to. And yes, I believe we should have done that as producers, because if you give your word, you need to live to your word. But unfortunately, it's not what happened with many people. And then there was all this amount of defaults in the industry and in the market that people are yet to still find someone to blame for. And by saying this, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but I am saying that I believe we all need to learn a lesson from this and spread the risk in a better way. I believe that businesses that went all the way forward and are always covering the coffees too much in the long term, they're going to be open to have these type of dramas, and where coffee doesn't even show up or it doesn't exist. So I believe it's going to open a door to that. We need to be, in a way, diversifying the risk. And that may mean that we can cover a little bit of our coffees going forward, then we do shorter contracts for another bit of our coffee, and that we're even exposed to buying local coffee or spot coffees where we are, because that way you can really diversify your risk. And I think this is something very interesting that happened in the last 15 months, because a lot of people that have these long positions, they never got the coffees, and then they had to go out in the market where they were and try to find local coffees. And when they're looking for 1 or 2 tons, that's easy. But when they're looking for 20 or 40 tons, then that is completely difficult. So I guess people are going to have to relook at the way they forward contract coffees, because I understand from a business perspective, most people are about just knowing and understanding what the cost of goods are going to be for the future. But that
Right.
also brings other risks into the table. If you go too long and then there's a big movement in price, then that I will either affect the producer or the roaster. And what we're trying to find is a more balanced place, a more just place for everyone in the coffee industry, so that we all can work together. And I believe by diversifying all those tools that we have, by future contracts, by buying the same harvest, and then by buying sometimes even spot coffees, you can really diversify that and find a better place for everyone in the market. So that's one of the things. Price volatility, I think, is going to be really interesting to see how the appetite of people changes to do longer and shorter contracts. It's going to be really challenging to decide what is the strategy moving forward. And then finally, obviously, understanding the delays and the impacts that the logistics side and the shipping side is going to bring into different producing regions. And it all depends on where you are. I think big shipping lines are giving priority to the places that they move more cargo to. So, for example, we have been experiencing really high challenges uh, to get shipments to go from Colombia to Canada or from Colombia to New Zealand. And that is because the amount of routes going there are a lot less than when you try to book a container into the US or Europe or UK. So I guess this is another raising challenge that we have, that is going to be part of the way we work, because unfortunately, roasters around the world need coffee by one date. And that means they need to order coffees way before to make sure that the coffee is there when they need to roast. And we all have to be part of it by going backwards and calculating the risk of not being able to meet the timelines. And I guess this has to be shared with everyone. It's not only one person's responsibility, but we're all in the same boat. We're all part of the same team. When you have a grower, an exporter, an importer, and a roaster, we're a team, all of us together.
Yep.
And the idea is to work together in a way that we can guarantee that coffee gets to origin and to consumers in a timely manner. But these days, a timely manner is very difficult to digest and understand what it means. And it means being flexible. It means being able to have plan A, B, C, and being able to accept that there's going to be challenges and that we have to all work together to make sure that we can keep doing it for the next few 5, 10, 20 years ahead.
I guess another aspect that I hadn't thought of that is leading into the agility that's going to be needed by a lot of people is what's happening with currencies.
That's even probably a massive concern that we all have. And it depends on which country you're on.
Yep.
For example, at the moment, I'm having nightmares looking at the Aussie dollar.
Hammered in Australia. Hammered in Australia. Like every hour, the dollar's dropping.
But that is the thing. I was speaking to a few larger banks and people that we do forward contracts with in terms of currencies. And in the last month, everyone was expecting the Aussie dollar to be a lot more strong.
Yeah.
And then something just changed and we started only speaking about inflation and then interest rates coming up. And then it went from being strong to being completely weak. So the truth is no one really knows where this is heading to. And there's so many different variables at the moment.
Yep.
Everything is so volatile that you just got to be open to what happens. But definitely is a massive challenge. Definitely is a challenge that we've always had while working in coffee when you don't work in the same currency. I think, for example, working in the US is a lot easier than working outside the US because coffee is paid around the world in US dollars. So another challenge to look into.
Yeah. Before we wrap up this episode and get into the last episode, something that I thought while you were talking is that that your generation of coffee producer and the way that you're approaching the supply chain and the way that you're doing economics and trading is very much balancing out the power structure in the coffee supply chain compared to what it would have been for like your father's generation or the generation before them. Would you agree?
Yeah, in a way, we're trying to be fair.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to do, and that is my explanation of what I said to you before in terms of the contracts.
Yeah.
I think we should find a fair place so that we can all thrive and work together. It's never about doing really well and then the other one not doing well enough to not survive, or the other way around. I think if we're all moving forward and being progressive and making a living out of it, then we can thrive together. But it is hard to find what that means in terms of contracts and things like that. But I guess we all should work towards being fair and being able to pay better for coffees that are fantastic is a way of being fair. It doesn't matter where they come from or what they are. But look, it's always the challenge. It's always going to be the challenge, I guess.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's head into the next episode. And in the final episode of this series, we're going to talk about what the coffee supply chain is going to look like in the over the next decade, because I suspect that the kind of technology that's going to be required to move things along is going to be dependent on some of the challenges that we spoke about in this conversation with regards to supply chain and logistics. So, as well as production, on the ground in, let's say, Colombia. But let's do that. Okay. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everybody. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.